you see up there, it says, how much do you love Jesus? I know, that was a little segue that I was talking about at that little message I gave during the tithing offering. But the question is, how much do you love Jesus? Have you ever thought about that? Let me go back a step. Actually, do you even love Jesus? Because maybe there's some of us that don't even love Jesus. We don't even know who he is. Well, I wanted to just look at something because we had been talking about Easter and about Resurrection Sunday. And I mentioned this a little earlier, but I'm reading from the book of John, the Gospel of John in the 21st chapter, starting with the first verse. And it says, after these things, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias, and in this way he showed himself. Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and two others of his disciples were together. Simon Peter said to them, I'm going fishing. They said to him, we're going with you also. They went out and immediately got into the boat, and that night they caught nothing. It's kind of sad, isn't it? You spend all night trying to fish and you don't catch a thing, and this is actually your profession. I mean, these are not guys that were just having a hobby, you know, hey, let's go fishing. No, this is how they were making a living. But it goes on. But when the morning had now come, Jesus stood on the shore, yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Then Jesus said to them, children, have you any food? They answered him, no. He said to them, cast it in on the right side of the boat, and you will find some. So they cast, and now they were not able to draw it in because of the multitude of fish. Therefore, that disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, it is the Lord. Now when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he had removed it, and plunged into the sea. Always liked Peter. Peter didn't wait to row the boat in. He just decided, I'll jump and swim over there. But the other disciples came in the little boat, for they were not far from land, but about 200 cubits. Another translation says about 100 yards, so Peter didn't have that long of a swim. But he goes and swims anyway, and they were dragging the net with fish. Then as soon as they had come to land, they saw a fire of coals there, and fish lay on it, and bread. Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish which you have just caught. Simon Peter went up and dragged the net to land full of large fish, 153, and although there were so many, the net was not broken. Jesus said to them, come and eat breakfast. Yet none of the disciples dared to ask him, who are you, knowing that it was the Lord. Jesus then came and took the bread and gave it to them, and likewise the fish. This is now the third time Jesus showed himself to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. So when they had eaten breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me more than these? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, feed my lambs. He said to him again a second time, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, tend my sheep. He said to him the third time, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me? Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know all things, you know that I love you. Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. Here's Peter. Jesus comes to them. These guys basically went back to their profession. Let's make a little money, why not? We don't know what's going on. We know what we have to do, we're going to go fishing. And Peter gets the rest of the guys to go with him. So apparently Peter had some influence over some of these disciples, because they said, yeah, we'll go there. And they're there in the whole middle of the night trying to fish. Because that's what they do for a living. They're fishermen. They go and fish. And they catch nothing. So clearly, they weren't that good at their profession at this moment. until they meet Jesus. And Jesus says, throw the net on the other side. You know, I always wonder what some of the smaller details of the story are. Have you ever thought about that when you're reading the Bible? Have you ever thought that you're a fisherman, you've been doing this all your life, you just spent the entire night trying to fish for something and you realize you have none of it, and some guy on the beach who's not in a boat and probably is not a fisherman, and you don't even know who he is, says, throw your net on the other side, try it again. Really? Can you imagine that conversation that maybe is missing in there? Who is that guy? What is he talking about? We've been out all night. That must have been one of those, all right, whatever, dude. You know what? Why not? We've been doing this all night. Throw it on the other side and see what happens. What's the worst that can happen? We get nothing. We don't have anything anyway. And then to their surprise, they get the biggest catch of their life. Sounds like one of those fisherman tales, right? Caught a fish this big. But who realizes something? John realizes that's not just anybody standing on the beach over there. That's not just some guy who's a fisherman. That's Jesus Christ. And he screams it out. And Peter, being Peter, doesn't wait. Jump in and swim over there and see myself if this is really what's happening. And he gets there and there's a barbecue happening. This is a very odd story. It's a very interesting story, but it's odd. Why put this story in? And then the conversation that happens after this whole event is even stranger. And then we start to realize something, because we have a tendency when we read things, right? We know the beginning, the middle, and the end. But the people that are living through this don't have a clue of what's actually happening right now. They're in a bit of shock. So after this breakfast that Jesus prepares, there's a question. And what does Jesus exactly mean by, do you love me more than these? He says it 3 times to Peter. And he says it in front of the rest of the disciples that are there. There's some speculation as to what that meant. Some people say, well, Peter denied Jesus Christ, didn't he? And this is a way of reinstating Peter and the beginning of him becoming a leader in the church. There's some scholars that speculate, do you love me more than these fellow disciples do? See, that may have been the question. In other words, the question is not the same exact question 3 times. It may be, do you love me more than the rest of these guys do? You see, because not long ago, Peter was the guy who said, I don't care what anybody else does. I'm going to the death with you. Peter is the guy that jumps in first and asks the questions later, goes, oh. The guy that has a tendency to put his foot in his mouth. Because why? Peter's the guy that we all love. We watch him in all the movies that we have. He's the man of action. He's the guy, he's the superhero. He's the guy that jumps out into the water and takes off. He doesn't need to wait for a committee. He doesn't have to worry about what anybody else thinks. He just goes and asks questions later. And that's what Peter, not realizing it, was boasting about before Jesus died. I will go with you to the death. We all know from the story that that doesn't happen. Unfortunately, Peter denies it. Unfortunately.